Welcome to a deep dive into, well, pretty much everything. We're tackling excerpts from DK's Timelines of World History, and they weren't kidding with that title.
Talk about ambitious. It's a sweeping panorama from the last ice age to the modern world.
It really is. Looks like you're after the big picture, those major turning points that shaped civilizations.
Absolutely.
So get ready for a 100,000-year sprint where we uncover those "wait, that happened" moments, and maybe how they're connected across continents.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Let's kick off with a real brain twister. The last ice age. Our planet locked in ice for over 100,000 years. Just let that sink in for a second. This book highlights how these huge ice sheets really messed with early human migration.
It's humbling, isn't it, that power of climate change? But even with that kind of pressure, those early humans, they were busy creating art. Think about the Chauvet cave paintings, over 30,000 years old.
It's mind-blowing. Those early humans huddled around a fire, creating such intricate art.
It really makes you think about that human need to create, even when times are tough. And on the other side of the planet, around the same time, another amazing feat.
You're talking about pottery, right? In China.
Exactly. Two completely different corners of the world, but both showing incredible ingenuity.
It really throws a wrench into that idea that human development just follows a straight line, doesn't it?
Totally. It points to a much more, how should I say it, dynamic and connected past than we often imagine. But let's jump ahead now. Around 14,000 to 12,000 BCE, those massive ice sheets finally start to melt.
And the world as we know it begins to, well, take shape.
Right. But this climate shift had some major consequences. Lots of those ice age animals, like your woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats, gone just like that.
Another reminder of how much climate change can impact an ecosystem. But humans, they adapted. They started establishing those first permanent settlements.
It's a huge turning point. Going from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, what gets me is that these first settlements, they weren't just simple villages.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Göbekli Tepe.
Bingo! Massive stone structures, detailed carvings, all dating back to a time before pottery.
Before pottery. It makes you rethink everything we thought we knew about how civilizations developed.
It does. Göbekli Tepe suggests that maybe organized religion, or at least shared rituals, played a big role in how those early settlements formed.
It's like we're still figuring out this puzzle of our past. Who knows what else we'll discover?
Exactly. But hold on. While they were building Göbekli Tepe in what's now Turkey, other parts of the world were hopping too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
By 5000 BCE, you've got small villages thriving in Japan during the Jomon period. They were making some really intricate pottery, even back then.
Yeah. It gives you a glimpse into their culture, their artistry.
And over in the Jordan Valley, around the same time, Jericho was busy building walls.
They were way ahead of the game. Talk about needing protection. Not just from other folks, but from the elements too, right?
Absolutely. Those early settlements, they were always walking a tightrope between human conflict and Mother Nature.
Speaking of challenges, let's hop over to the Indus River Valley. Around 5500 BCE, you have the rise of the Indus Valley civilization.
Now, there is a civilization that's shrouded in mystery. They were as advanced as the Egyptians and Mesopotamians, but their script still can't fully read it.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. But what we do know is, by 3000 BCE, the world is primed for some seriously impressive empires.
No kidding. And it all starts in Egypt.
Right, with King Narmer unifying Upper and Lower Egypt in 3100 BCE.
The birth of a dynasty that would change everything.
And just a few centuries later, the Egyptians decided to, well, reshape their landscape a bit.
You mean with those gigantic tombs, the pyramids?
The pyramids. Talk about impressive engineering. They're a testament to the Egyptians' belief in the afterlife and their pharaoh's absolute power.
To think they moved those massive stone blocks without any modern technology.
It's mind-boggling. But while the pyramids were going up in Egypt, over in Mesopotamia, things were getting interesting too.
You're talking about the Amorites, right? They migrated from the Levant and ended up founding the first Babylonian Empire.
With their capital at Babylon, which would become a symbol of, well, ancient grandeur.
Yeah.
And later, maybe a little too much extravagance.
Here's where it gets really wild. While all that's happening in Mesopotamia, way over in England, another monumental structure was being built. Stonehenge.
No way. Stonehenge and the Babylonian Empire. Two totally different cultures, worlds apart, building these massive, ambitious structures. Why?
It makes you wonder, what drives humans to these monumental efforts?
Was it about imposing order on the world? Appease the gods? Maybe they just wanted to leave their mark.
Probably all of the above. But it just shows you there's this common thread throughout history, wouldn't you say?
Humans always striving for something bigger than themselves, trying to connect with something beyond our immediate existence. But while they were busy with stone in Egypt and Britain, over in West Africa, the Nuke culture was mastering a whole different material.
I love those terracotta figures. Those stylized sculptures are like little windows into their world.
Absolutely. But their innovation went way beyond art. They discovered something that would revolutionize human civilization.
Iron smelting.
And get this, they figured it out on their own, around the same time as civilizations in Europe and Asia were doing the same.
It really changes how we think about technological advancements. Clearly, innovation wasn't limited to one place.
It's like this universal human ingenuity, no matter the time or place.
By 1000 BCE, iron technology, which got its start in places like West Africa, had spread as far as the Shetland Islands.
Talk about interconnectedness. And as iron technology spread, so did the reach of some powerful empires.
In Persia, you had Cyrus the Great establishing the Achaemenid Empire, known for its tolerance and a really efficient government.
Cyrus was a fascinating guy. He understood that real power wasn't just about military strength, but about winning over the people he conquered. His empire stretched all the way from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River Valley.
Meanwhile, over in China, a ruler named Qin Shi Huang was on a mission. He wanted to unite all those warring states that had divided the region for so long.
And he did, establishing the Qin dynasty and earning the title First Emperor.
Qin Shi Huang is a real study in contrasts. He was ruthless, power-hungry, but he also brought stability to China. His decision to standardize weights, measures, even their writing system, it really unified them.
He was a man of big ideas, but also a ruthless pragmatist. While empires were on the rise in the East, across the Mediterranean, a new power was emerging. One that would rule Western civilization for centuries.
Rome. Even today, that name brings to mind images of gladiators, emperors, this civilization that seemed unstoppable. But Rome's path to power, it wasn't easy.
Before they could become top dog, they had to go through a pretty tough rival.
Carthage.
The Punic Wars. 3 brutal wars between these Mediterranean powerhouses. It was a clash of civilizations.
And in the end, that clash forged the Roman Republic into a powerful empire.
But Rome wasn't just about military might. They were incredible builders,
Their engineering skills were amazing. They revolutionized architecture with concrete.
which allowed them to create some truly awe-inspiring structures. The Pantheon, the Colosseum, those buildings are still standing today.
And they weren't just buildings, they were statements, showcasing the power and skill of the Roman Empire.
But even the mightiest empires can fall. Overexpansion, economic troubles, those constant waves of invasions from, well, those they called barbarians, it all led to the decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire.
A good reminder that even the strongest powers are not invincible. The only constant is change, right?
So true. But even though the Western Roman Empire fell, the Eastern Roman Empire, which later became the Byzantine Empire, lived on.
Right. Preserving a lot of Roman culture and law for centuries to come. It's a good reminder that history is rarely simple or straightforward.
It's messy and complicated, with twists and turns you'd never see coming. And with that, we've reached the end of our first act. Or should I say, our first millennium.
A millennium packed with incredible innovations and devastating conflicts. But we're just getting warmed up. But don't forget, while Rome's time was winding down, another great civilization was flourishing across the Atlantic.
The Maya.
Right. Their city-states with those incredible pyramids and hieroglyphs are still captivating people today.
They were so far ahead of their time in mathematics, astronomy, art, and that complex understanding of time.
But then in the 8th century, things take a turn. The unthinkable happened. This civilization that seemed so unstoppable, it just went into decline.
It's a mystery that still has historians stumped to this day. What could cause such a rapid collapse? Was it a drought, deforestation, maybe endless warfare, or a horrible combination of it all?
It's like a giant reality check. Even the most advanced societies aren't immune to collapse.
And it shows just how connected everything is. Human societies, the environment, it's all linked. But while the Maya civilization was facing its own struggles on the other side of the world, a new force was emerging.
The rise of Islam in the 7th century really changed things across Afro-Eurasia. It reshaped the political and cultural landscape, and within a few centuries, a new era of enlightenment was starting, one that built on the knowledge of those earlier civilizations.
This book really emphasizes the Islamic Golden Age, as a time of incredible intellectual and cultural growth, doesn't it?
It was groundbreaking. They took knowledge from the classical world, translated texts from Greek, Persian, Indian sources, making sure that wisdom wasn't lost.
It's amazing to see that interconnectedness of human knowledge.
These scholars weren't just copying. They were taking these texts and really thinking them through, adding their own ideas and discoveries in fields like math, astronomy, medicine, you name it.
They were insatiable, like translating Ptolemy's Almagest, this complicated Greek text about astronomy, to talk about dedication.
They were determined to understand how the universe worked. While Islamic scholars were pushing the boundaries of knowledge over in Europe, things were changing too.
The early Middle Ages, a time that often gets labeled as the Dark Age.
But like you said before, history is rarely black and white.
Exactly. It was a time of political division, sure, but also a time of incredible cultural and religious change.
It was during this time that Charlemagne came onto the scene. He managed to unite a large part of Western Europe.
Crowned Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day, 800 CE.
What a way to make an entrance. Charlemagne really pushed for a revival of learning and the arts and laid the foundation for what would become a powerful empire.
And a distinct European identity. But while he was consolidating power in mainland Europe, across the North Sea, a different group was making waves.
The Vikings.
Known for their skills at sea and, yeah, those raids, but they were more than just raiders, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Their voyages took them all over the place, from North America to the Caspian Sea. And they weren't just exploring. They established settlements in Iceland, Greenland, even Vinland, which historians think was somewhere on the coast of North America.
It's incredible to think about them crossing the Atlantic in those wooden longships centuries before Columbus.
Talk about adventurous. But this period wasn't just about exploration and conquest. This book mentions a remarkable figure from Japan, a woman named Murasaki Shikibu.
Murasaki Shikibu. What a name.
She was a lady-in-waiting in the Japanese imperial court and an incredibly talented writer. Her most famous work, The Tale of Genji, is often considered the world's first novel.
Wow, the world's first novel.
Sure.
That's amazing. What's it about?
It gives you a look into the lives and loves of the Heian court. It's really captivating.
It shows you the power of storytelling, how humans across time and cultures connect with each other through shared experiences.
Exactly. But as we move into the 14th century, a dark cloud appears on the horizon.
A dark cloud that would change the course of history forever. The Black Death.
A pandemic that swept across Asia and Europe with terrifying speed. It's hard to imagine anything more devastating.
It wiped out huge chunks of the population, wrecked economies, and left a permanent scar of fear and uncertainty. Some areas lost as much as a third of their people. Can you imagine the impact of that kind of loss?
It's terrifying to think about. It's a stark reminder that even when societies become complex and advanced, they're still vulnerable to nature's power.
But as we know, even in the darkest times, the human spirit finds a way to survive and rebuild. And that's what happened in the aftermath of the Black Death. A new era of cultural and intellectual change began in Europe.
The Renaissance.
A time of rediscovering classical learning art philosophy. It was like a creative explosion.
The Renaissance was more than just a rediscovery. It was a fundamental shift in how people saw the world.
People started questioning long-held beliefs, putting human potential and achievement front and center.
Celebrating individuality, creativity, innovation.
Figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, they weren't just artists, they were inventors, engineers, true Renaissance men who pushed the limits of what humans could achieve.
They seem to embody this limitless curiosity, this drive to explore and understand everything about humanity and the world around them.
But while Europe was having its Renaissance moment, another massive change was happening, one that would connect continents in a way never seen before.
The age of exploration, driven by a thirst for new trade routes and fueled by advances in shipbuilding and navigation.
European explorers set off into the unknown.
This book focuses on the Portuguese, who were pioneers in those early voyages. It talks about Bartolomeu Dias, who rounded the southern tip of Africa in 1488, proving that a sea route to Asia was possible.
That was a turning point. It opened up so many possibilities for trade and exploration. It's amazing to think that just a few years earlier, Christopher Columbus had set sail westward, hoping to find a new way to Asia too.
And his discovery of the Americas in 1492 would have a huge ripple effect on the world. It led to European colonialism and completely changed the course of history. And while the Portuguese and Spanish were focused on the Atlantic across the Mediterranean, the Ottoman Empire was growing stronger.
The Ottomans, led by figures like Mehmed II, who conquered Constantinople in 1453.
Well, Mehmed II was a fascinating figure. A ruthless conqueror, no doubt, but also a supporter of the arts and sciences.
He even commissioned works from Italian Renaissance artists.
Yeah.
Talk about a complex legacy.
It shows that you can't always put historical figures into neat categories.
He embodies that clash and blend of cultures, even when those cultures seemed at odds with each other. But tragically, not all of these connections were positive.
You're right. While the age of exploration opened up new worlds, it also revealed a much darker side of humanity.
The transatlantic slave trade.
Millions of Africans were taken from their homes, forced across the Atlantic, and subjected to unimaginable cruelty.
This book mentions the Royal African Company, a British company that controlled a huge part of the slave trade. It's shocking that a company could profit from the suffering of so many people.
It's a chilling reminder that progress doesn't always mean everyone benefits. As we move into the 18th century, we see a world grappling with these contradictions, a world on the verge of revolution.
And we're back, ready to tackle the 20th century.
Fasten your seatbelts, because things are about to get really interesting.
We're talking groundbreaking technology, yeah, but also massive conflicts, clashing ideologies. It's like the 20th century took everything up a notch, both the good and the bad.
No doubt about it. And it reminds us that progress, it's not always a straight line upwards.
Definitely not. So let's dive into this whirlwind of a century, starting with a conflict that really shook the world, World War I, often called the Great War. And it's a pretty chilling title when you think about the sheer scale of it all.
Millions of soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire. And those new technologies, machine guns, tanks, poison gas, they made warfare even more brutal, more impersonal.
Imagine those trenches, the constant fear, the unimaginable losses. It's almost impossible to grasp how devastating it truly was. And as if the war itself wasn't enough, it also ignited a revolution.
The Russian Revolution, 1917. Right in the middle of this global conflict, you have this internal upheaval that completely overthrows centuries of Tsarist rule. Talk about a powder keg.
It shows you the power of ideas, that yearning for change, even in the midst of chaos. The Bolsheviks, with Lenin at the helm, they promised peace, land, and bread. Those promises resonated with a nation exhausted by war and inequality.
And that revolution gave birth to the Soviet Union, the world's first communist state, which of course set the stage for a whole new kind of global standoff.
The Cold War, a war fought in the shadows with espionage, proxy conflicts, and that terrifying nuclear arms race.
A time of paranoia and suspicion, where the threat of nuclear annihilation was always looming. The Cuban Missile Crisis, that's a prime example of just how close things came to disaster.
13 incredibly tense days in 1962. The whole world held its breath as the U.S. and the Soviet Union went head-to-head.
It's a chilling reminder of how fragile peace can be, even when it seems like common sense should prevail.
Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed in that instance. But the Cold War wasn't just about geopolitical chess matches. It had a huge impact on everyday people, too.
Life on both sides of the Iron Curtain meant constant surveillance, censorship, and the ever-present fear of conflict.
A stark reminder that these ideological battles have real-world consequences. But even the most deeply entrenched conflicts, they don't last forever.
Wow.
The fall of the Berlin Wall in '89, that was a pivotal moment.
Symbolic of the Iron Curtain crumbling, leading to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. It felt like a new era was dawning, didn't it?
A collective sigh of relief across the globe, I'd imagine. This sense of optimism, a hope for peace and cooperation. But as we've learned, history is a way of throwing curveballs.
New challenges emerged, ethnic conflicts, resurgent nationalism, global terrorism, and then, of course, there's the looming threat of climate change.
This book, even though it's focused on the past, it hints at this crisis we're facing. A reminder that the choices we make today, they have a ripple effect on generations to come. So here we are, standing at this crossroads of history.
We've traveled from the Ice Age to the Information Age. We've seen humanity at its best and its worst. Incredibly innovative, incredibly destructive.
It's a lot to process. But as you delve deeper into these timelines, think about the patterns. What lessons can we learn from the past, the good and the bad, to help us navigate the challenges of the 21st century?
Because history isn't just about what happened before. It's about understanding who we are, where we came from, and where we're going next.
And that's a wrap on our historical roller coaster ride. We've covered a lot of ground, from the dawn of humanity to the brink of the future.
Hopefully it sparked some curiosity and given you a fresh perspective on how we got to where we are today.
Because remember, history, it's more than just dates and names. It's the story of us.